Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Course studio. Welcome to the show. Coffee number 2 is nearly done, and 2 is exactly the number of episodes that I put out today. Well, okay, I guess at the time of me saying this, but not the time that you're listening to this, because at the time that you're listening to this would be episode number 3, because of course, earlier, the very first episode from today is on Urbrask Heretic Praetor, and yeah, this is a quick take you're not going to want to miss, because this is a Praetor that, well, can do some great things for you and some very mean things for your opponents. But don't check that episode yet, or this other episode on Anello the Painter, and I ask the question, just exactly how broken is this brand new commander? But again, don't leave just yet, because on this episode, I'm asking the question, well, actually, technically, Eddie asked me the question, will this get banned? So to find out what exactly Halo Fountain does and why it could be considered to be ban-worthy, let's jump into it to find out after you make sure that you blame Eddie for this episode in the comments below. Thank you. So, Halo Fountain is a brand new mythic from this set, and my, is it a mythic card. It is an artifact for 2 and a white, and it has 3 abilities. Let's go through them. Pay a white, tap, untap a tapped creature you control, create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. The second is pay white, tap, untap 2 tapped creatures you control, draw a card. That's right, look! A mono white card that says draw a card. Oh no, Wizards, did you make a mistake? Oh, did you put draw a card on a mono white card? Aren't you breaking the color pie? This is terrible, Wizards. But no, that's not why this card could be potentially ban-worthy, even though Wizards very much doesn't like putting draw a card on mono white cards. Regardless, the last part, let's get to it. Pay white. I think I said that correctly. 5 white, essentially. Tap. Untap 15 tapped creatures you control, you win the game. So let's actually break this card down piece by piece and then really dig into that last part, because again, that last part is the quote-unquote ban-worthy part of the card. So this is a decently low to the ground artifact, again, just 3 mana. Again, you need to have white in your commander's color identity to actually utilize it, though the first ability obviously can help you utilize your creatures to make more creatures. Now, maybe you've got a creature that's tapped because it's a mana dork or has an ability, or it's crewing a vehicle, or maybe you just attacked and it survived, or even if it attacked and it's not going to survive, you can still untap it during combat. So yeah, no activate, only as a sorcery here. So that first part can help you build up the amount of creatures that you have. The second part, obviously, again, can be utilized for card advantage. 2 mana and untapping 2 creatures for card advantage is really good. And obviously, keep in mind that with this card, you can always utilize it as, as a kind of combat trick, some kind of a pseudo-vigilance, essentially. If your opponents are going to be attacking you, well, if you've got this untapped and you've got some creatures in play that are tapped, usually they could get through, but you could just pay to untap those creatures and then block. So they need to consider that. Now, obviously, even with just those first 2 pieces of this card, those first 2 abilities, this would probably see play in the vast majority. Again, I don't like to say auto-include or every single mono white deck out there, but yeah, drawing in mono white is really hard to come by, and this is a fantastic repeatable way to do so. So yeah, a lot of mono white decks out there are going to want this card, and I can probably guess it's going to be pretty expensive. And yeah, again, this just value-based token generating draw engine can also just win you the game. And it can do so in a way that we really don't see too often anymore. Because the vast majority of cards these days that are printed that essentially can win you the game are ones that happen on an upkeep trigger. That means when you get a permanent like this one down that has an alternative win condition, your opponents are at least going to probably have one trip around the table to try to deal with that, or to deal with your board or whatnot to try to stop you. But in this case, this can very well just be pay 8 mana, win the game. Now, obviously, you need to meet the condition that you've got 15 tapped creatures, but, okay, in Commander, obviously, I have seen boards with way more than 15 tokens or creatures on the board. It is okay, maybe I shouldn't say very easy, but especially for certain commanders out there, it is very doable to get 15 creatures in play. And again, with those creatures having to be tapped being the only requirement, that is not hard to meet, and one that if you really need to, you can just meet through combat by swinging with your creatures. Or again, if you've got a commander like Shorakai Genesis Engine, that brand new vehicle commander, just crew Shorakai with all your creatures. It doesn't matter. All you need to do is get those creatures to be tapped, and then you say, oh, by the way, cast Hail Fountain, by the way, I win the game. Now, I will say, yes, 15 is still a good amount of creatures. Yes, it is a good amount of creatures, but this card is going to fit right into a lot of the decks out there that just can make a ton of tokens because it's already providing you value. It can also just then win you the game, maybe out of nowhere, maybe not out of nowhere, but yeah. Don't hear what I'm not saying, though. I am not saying that this card is going to be banned. I am saying that this card is not typical of your win the game card as of recent history, because again, Wizards tends to have those win the game effects be a more kind of longer term effect. Again, you have to wait maybe until your next upkeep for that actually to occur. So while I'm not saying that it is going to be banned, I am saying that it is reasonable to have the discussion on whether a card like this could potentially be banned, because yeah, as the rules committee has shown so far, they're not really that big of a fan of 8 mana win the game cards. Like, Coalition Victory, which is a sorcery for 3 and Wooburg, so 8 mana, and it says you win the game if you control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. Now, whether or not you agree with Coalition Victory being banned, we can both agree with, well, yes, this is also 8 mana, and it also is something that can win you the game on the spot. If you essentially meet the requirements and this doesn't get countered, well, you just win. Now, for certain decks out there, Coalition Victory is going to be easier to achieve than, a Halo Fountain Victory, but still, each, have that requirement that can be met and can be met right away and not stopped if it's not countered. So, like it or not, again, this kind of immediate win the game type of card with a decently easy to meet requirement, I don't think Coalition Victory is going to be unbanned anytime in the near future. And speaking of another 8 mana win the game card, and this one actually deals with creatures as well, let's talk about Biorhythm. Biorhythm is banned as well, and it is a sorcery that says each player's life total becomes the number of creatures they control. So obviously this can win you the game in a different way. If you've got at least one creature in play, you can survive, and if your opponents don't have any creatures in play, maybe you wipe the board, and maybe you've got an indestructible creature in play or something like that, yes, then you can just win the game for just casting an 8 mana spell. Obviously, this is kind of like the reverse where, you're trying to make sure your opponents don't have creatures, whereas Halo Fountain is, making sure that you actually have creatures and tapped creatures. But still, it essentially, like Coalition Victory, again, is a spell that takes 8 mana to just instantly win the game. I mean, not at instant speed, but you know what I mean. And, okay, yes, I do keep saying 8 mana, and technically you could split Halo Fountain up to 2 separate turns, but again, what I'm basically saying is you can just cast, then activate, and then win. So yeah, 8 mana in 1 turn with Halo Fountain. Okay? Now, a somewhat similar card to Halo Fountain that is not banned is Epic Struggle. It's an enchantment for 2 green. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more creatures, you win the game. So again, like I mentioned before, Wizards typically, at least as of recent years, I guess this goes all the way back to, what is that, Judgment? So when I was playing, for the most part, will have win the game conditions on an upkeep trigger, because then your opponents, have actual time to respond to it and time to actually try to stop you from winning the game in that alternative way. Now, this one obviously takes even more creatures. They don't have to be tapped, but you have to control them, until your next upkeep. So Obviously, your opponents can interact with that. If there's any kind of a board wipe or ways to get rid of a couple of your creatures or this enchantment, they can stop you. Unlike Halo Fountain, it can't just win you the game on the spot, and obviously, again, this card literally just does this. It is just an alternative win condition, whereas Halo Fountain is a value engine for tokens as well for card draw, and on top of that, it also has a win condition that can just win you the game right away. So, although Epic Struggle doesn't see much play, I can definitely see Halo Fountain seeing a lot of play in the right decks. And again, by right decks, I mean pretty much any mono-white deck, because they need card draw, wizards. But yeah, even just quickly looking at some other win-the-game cards, we can see some similar patterns like Mortal Kombat, Simic Ascendancy, and Revel in Riches, each of which have the text at the beginning of your upkeep. Mortal Kombat is like the reverse of Epic Struggle. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, if 20 or more creature cards are in your graveyard, you win the game. Simic Ascendancy says at the beginning of your upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. And then Revel in Riches says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Now, of course, Simic Ascendancy and Revel in Riches also have additional text, which helps you with, counters and treasures, so they can actually help you get there. But yeah, the one thread that ties all these together is that, again, although they are alternative win conditions, they are dependent on getting to your upkeep, so your opponents have some time to help try to stop you. So, of course, we can also see this same thread go through cards like Feldar Sovereign, Triskei Decaphile, I think I said that right, and then Liliana's Contract. Feldar Sovereign has at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. Now, this one is very interesting because obviously, just by playing a game of Commander at the very beginning of the game, you meet this requirement. And so, yeah, it being an upkeep trigger is huge because your opponents have time to knock your life total down. Next up, there's Triskei Decaphile, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game. And of course, it gives you a maximum hand size and ways to draw too, so it can help you get there. And then Liliana's Contract says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. So again, all of these say upkeep. They are all pretty easy win conditions to meet for the right deck. Again, 40 life, you already started that. Triskei Decaphile, as long as you're drawing cards, in a blue deck, go figure, you can do that. You're going to get to 13 at some point. And Liliana's Contract, if you've got, a decent number of demons in the deck with different names, or maybe even changelings, yep, that works too, you can win the game there. But again, in order to do so, you need to keep the alternative win condition card in play on top of meeting that requirement as well at the time of your upkeep. Now, of course, we also have seen other alternative win condition cards that don't require an upkeep trigger, like, Maze's End or Approach the Second Sun, but these are a bit more difficult or a bit more telling to actually meet. Maze's End has pay 3, tap, return Maze's End to its owner's hand, search your library for a gate card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If you control 10 or more gates with different names, you win the game. So, obviously, this can be very telling if you're getting this into play. Your opponents know, okay, well, if they start trying to get a ton of gates into play, they are trying to win with this, and yeah, it can take quite a while to get a lot of gates into play to win in this way. And then Approach the Second Sun, you literally have to show that you are going for this kind of a win by casting it the first time, because it says if it was cast from your hand and you've cast another spell name, Approach the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put it into its owner's library, 7 from the top, and you gain 7 life. So if you cast it the first time, your opponents know, okay, we can't let that player cast that again. We know exactly where that card went, and we know we can probably try to stop it when it actually comes back. Versus, again, a card like Halo Fountain, which says, hey, I'm playing this if you can't counter it, and I've already met this condition, and you can't stop that condition, which is already on the board, then I just pay the mana to do so, and I win. Now, of course, really quick, I do have to also bring up some other alternative win condition cards that are, well, incredibly potent in, some forms of Commander, especially in CEDH competitive Commander, with cards like Laboratory Maniac, Jace Builder Mysteries, and especially Thassa's Oracle. Each of these are essentially, hey, I ran out of cards in my library and I drew an extra card, I win the game. And yes, on the most competitive axis of Commander, there are some really quick ways that you can actually do this and win from there. So, am I saying that Halo Fountain is anywhere near the most powerful win condition out there? No, definitely not. I am just trying to illustrate that it is different than many of the alternative win conditions that we've seen recently, again, because it is one that can just kind of win on the spot, which you typically don't see. That being said, again, I do not expect a ban for this card, and I'm not saying that I do want it banned. All I'm saying that the discussion for it being banned is relevant, and thank you, Eddie, for bringing that up. Anyways, Let's talk about a commander that might want to include this in its deck and that it can meet the requirement very quickly. Let's talk about Reese the Redeemed. Reese has pay 2 in Selesnya, tap, create a 1/1 green and white elf warrior creature token, and by paying for Selesnya and tapping it, for each creature token you control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. So Reese can very quickly double up your army, and again, essentially, hey, go to your end step, with, say, 8 creatures on the board, or, 7 tokens plus Reese, let's just say that. You do this, you double that up, you're at 15 creatures next turn, and then you're able to meet that requirement as long as you're able to tap those creatures. Which again can be done in a wide variety of ways, including combat. Next up, how about a commander that can make an absurd amount of tokens extremely quickly with Elenda the Duskrose? Elenda has, whenever the creature dies, put a +1 counter on Elenda the Duskrose. And then when Elenda dies, you create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Elenda's power. So, Elenda can get massive very quickly, again, just by a ton of creatures dying, and then when that happens, well, you maybe just have something that you can sacrifice Elenda. Maybe you've got another piece of equipment attached to Elenda to make that power even greater, like a Blackblade Reforge or something. You make a ton of tokens, and then you say, oh, well, looks like I've got 20 or so tokens. Cool, that's very easy to meet that requirement, and let's just win the game. I mean, at the very least, Halo Fountain is a great way for this deck to also just make tokens and draw cards too, so why not just, have this card that also just has a win condition, again, this deck can actually meet pretty easily, stapled onto it too. Now, obviously, depending on your deck and its mana fixing, the more and more colors that you have, the more difficult it is to actually activate that last ability with, it basically being 5 white mana. But still, there are definitely decks out there that can do it, and Kaikar is definitely a commander that can make a ton of tokens incredibly quickly. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying, and you can sacrifice a spirit to add red. So even just casting Halo Fountain is going to help you actually get toward that requirement. And again, if you can't even activate that, you still get value out of that card by making more tokens, which, again, with these flying spirits, you can easily swing through on at least one player the vast majority of the time to get them tapped. And you can also just utilize them to draw cards. And yes, then when you've got your mana fixed to the point where you can actually activate that to win and you've got enough creatures in play, go for it. So, of course, in a similar way, there's a Layla Artful Provocateur, which can also make you tokens whenever you cast spells like Halo Fountain. It says, whenever you cast an artifact or enchantment spell, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. So yeah, Layla, she can make you a ton of tokens very quickly. They can be very deadly. They've got flying. They get pumped by Layla as well. And yeah, now you can utilize Halo Fountain to make even more tokens, to draw cards, and then ultimately to win, if you want to win in that way. And I mean, in a very quick and kind of out of nowhere way, you can also win with a commander like Thalise, Reverent Medium, which says at the beginning of each end step, create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X the number of tokens you create this turn. So even just before your turn, with basically an empty board outside of this commander, you just cast something like, like a Secure the Wastes or a Call the Coppercoats, and you make a ton of tokens out of nowhere. That is essentially doubled, because again, it says at the beginning of each end step, so even the run right before your turn, you get that many 1/1 spirits, so you can easily get to 15 tokens out of nowhere, and then next turn just cast win. Or again, I should say, get your creatures to be tapped, cast, then win. And of course, one final commander that I need to mention here, and this kind of encompasses a lot of, commanders just by saying it, a mono-white commander like Daring King of Keldor would like this card. And again, pretty much just utilize any mono-white commander for this spot as well, but this one is incredibly effective with it. Darian says, whenever you're dealt damage, you may create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So yeah, your opponents have to be very, very careful when deciding to dish out damage to you, because now you're just going to make a ton of tokens, and if you happen to have Halo Fountain, cool, you got 15 tokens, you probably can just win from there. But yeah, again, not even considering that last part as part of the card, there are a ton of mono-white decks out there that are going to be very much wanting this card just for more token production, and especially for the card draw. So, with all that said, now it is time for me to wrap up this episode and give you my final thoughts on Halo Fountain. This card would have been a mono-white staple without that last ability. And again, that's just my opinion, I should say. But yeah, I mean, a repeatable source of token creation that can untap your creatures, which gives you more value. But more importantly, again, a repeatable source of card draw is just unheard of in mono-white. But then, of course, you add on that last part, which is like, oh, by the way, I can just win the game. And again, with certain commanders, it is, again, I don't want to say very easy, but very doable to win the game quite quickly with this. And again, your opponents might not be able to stop you if they don't have a counterspell and you're already set up to do so. Because again, you don't have to actually, wait to an upkeep or anything like that. This can just end up being an 8 mana I win the game spell for those scenarios. So, do I think that this card will be banned or should be banned? No. But again, I think that the discussion is relevant because, yeah, we really don't see too many spells out there these days that are like, hey, you just win the game right now. But again, I could be wrong about all of that. Again, the Rules Committee has a history of not liking 8 mana win the game things, so you never know, but probably not. Regardless, stay tuned to this channel for even more exciting spoilers and for an update on the count of number of cups of coffee that I have been drinking. Because, of course, that's the most exciting part of spoiler season, right? And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.